I could tell the mood changed very quickly. And Amanda, so kind, but really kind of like got in my face and was just like, listen, the cord has detached from your placenta, and I'm going to have to manually extract your placenta. And this is going to be painful, but this has to be done.
Oof. Hi, I'm Kayla Heater, follower of Jesus, wife and mother of 5 children, Christian childbirth educator and doula, and your host of the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, where we share God-centered birth stories, evidence-based birth education, and our pursuit of surrendering our birth plans to God. Let's get started. Hey guys, hope your week is off to a great start. I am recording this on a Sunday, the day before it comes out. I'm actually getting ready to go teach our 3rd session of our childbirth course tonight, and always a fun time. For those of you who are eagerly awaiting our online version of the course, it is an online on-demand version of this course for those of you who don't live in the triad or who just can't make it work with your schedules for our group classes and would like to take the online course. My husband is diligently working on getting the course finished. He's been working on it almost every day. So if that is you, please reach out to me because I am giving a 50% discount to the first 10 couples who sign up and register for that course. So if you haven't already reached out to me and I don't already have your name down, please reach out to me and let me know so I can get you as one of those first 10 couples for the online course. Okay, that's all I have this week. So let's jump into this week's episode. Most first-time moms can expect 2 things. First, to go way past their due date. And second, to have a long marathon of a labor. For Morgan, however, this was not the case. When Morgan woke up near her due date with cramping, she didn't expect to be holding her baby just a few hours later. Sounds like a dream to most moms who spend hours and days laboring. But a precipitous labor has its downsides too. Thankfully, God was watching over her every step of the way, from before conception through postpartum. Listen in today for every detail of Morgan's entire story. Well, welcome to another episode of Surrendered Birth Stories. I am your host, Kayla Heater, and I have Miss Morgan with me today. Morgan, take a minute, introduce yourself, tell us about you and your life, and let us get to know you.
Hey, I'm really excited to be here and to share our story. Like Kayla said, my name is Morgan. I've been married to my husband, Chris, for about 5.5 years. We're originally from east of Raleigh, and we moved here to the Triad in 2020. We have a little dog named Nash, who was our first baby. And I'm going to be talking about Aubrey's birth story today. She's our first child, and she'll be 6 months old next week, which is crazy to think.
Oh, 6 months.
I
So is she
know.
a September baby?
She is September 15th.
Sweet, sweet girl. I'm a September baby, so I always love
I
love
love it.
September
It's a
babies.
good time of the year, I think.
Yes, the weather's perfect. Okay, well, let's get into her story then. So take us back. When did it all start? How did the pregnancy come about? Tell us the story.
So I actually have a cool story about her name and kind of her gender and just like a promise that I had from the Lord prior to becoming pregnant. So in the fall of 2023, we decided that we're ready to grow our family. And in December, during one of my quiet times, I just really felt like the Lord was just telling me about this little girl that we were going to have, and that we would have a daughter and it would be our first child. And it was just a promise that I was clinging to and really excited about. I had always wanted to have a little girl. So just to really get this confirmation from the Lord was exciting. And I ended up writing in my journal, I'm longing for Aubrey Wren Walston. And I didn't necessarily feel like the Lord gave me that name. That was just a name that I really liked. But I did really just feel that promise that we were going to have a daughter. I didn't know exactly when that was going to happen or, what, but I was just kind of clinging on to that. And about a month later, we found out that we were expecting. So super excited, first positive pregnancy. And yeah, it was just so exciting to tell my husband and to tell family and to tell friends. We're both the oldest siblings on both sides. So, the first grandbaby. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement around that.
That's awesome. So, had you guys been like trying to get pregnant for a while, or was it like that just that very first month that after the Lord told you he was going to give you a girl, was that the point at which you started trying?
Yeah, so we were very grateful for our journey. It was pretty quick. Kind of got off of contraceptives and started trying. I think it was about 2 cycles before we found out we were expecting. So thankfully, the road to parenthood was not very strenuous, and it was short because we had walked with friends who had kind of struggled and just had some infertility issues, and so we were very grateful for that. So.
Cool. So the Lord spoke to you kind of like smack dab in the middle of all of that.
Yeah, right in the middle. But it was a really sweet blessing. And then literally from the time I took the test and when I saw that second line, I was just like, this is her. Like, this is our girl.
Oh,
There was no doubt in my mind that she was our daughter. And then like a few weeks after we had found out that we were pregnant, my husband had never really loved that name, but he came to me after a couple weeks of like being pregnant, and he was like, I really love the name Aubrey. And I was like, oh my goodness. I was like, maybe this is a girl. And then, we later find out that she was in fact a girl, and that is her name, Aubrey Van Walston. So,
oh, that's so
yeah.
sweet. So, how did your pregnancy go? Was it smooth? Was it rough? Like, how did it go?
Yeah. So that first trimester was pretty tough, kind of nausea, fatigue, all of that rolled in. So much nausea to the point where I was getting sick multiple times a day, trouble keeping food down, losing weight, that kind of stuff. I ended up getting on a prescription to kind of help with that nausea, which is something I was not super stoked about, but at the end of the day, I knew that she needed nutrients. And so if that was going to help get that nutrients to her, then I went ahead with that. And as far as care providers, I've been a little bit of a birth nerd for most of my adult life. So listening to lots of birth stories, a birth podcast. So I knew just from a little bit of knowledge that I had that I was really looking for like a midwifery model of care. So when we moved to the Greensboro area, I chose a practice that had midwives and obstetricians so that, if anything were to arise, I would have kind of both if needed. So, strictly based off of scheduling and just time, that first visit that I had once I became pregnant at 8 weeks was the confirmation ultrasound. And I typically was planning to schedule with a midwife, but really just off scheduling, it didn't work out. So, I ended up seeing one of the obstetricians. And I was really nervous kind of going into that because I think in the crunchier birth space, there's a lot of fear around how some of the obstetricians can treat patients and really wanting to be heard and understood, and especially having preferences about low intervention things. I was a little nervous about meeting this provider, but the Lord is good, and she ended up being like my absolute favorite provider that I had worked with like my whole adult life. So I ended up choosing to stay with her rather than transferring to the midwife in the practice. So I was lucky enough to see her for every visit during my pregnancy. I had that option to see her continuously or to rotate through the providers. So I saw her, really felt like I developed a relationship with her, a good rapport. She listened to me. She took my concerns seriously. Like she would just sit in front of me, look me eye to eye, asked me how I was, asked me how my husband Chris was. It was just a really good experience and something that I was not expecting to have from an OB. So yeah, I was really, really grateful for that. But
Yeah.
yeah, first trimester, after we got through the nausea, one thing about me is I'm a pretty anxious person in general, regardless of pregnancy and hormones. But just throughout that first trimester, even though it was really tough, having the nausea, having the vomiting, being so fatigued, I did see the Lord through that, just kind of helping me, like reassuring me, because I am an anxious person, reassuring me that this was a healthy pregnancy, and that He was with me and with this baby. So even though those symptoms were really tough and it was really hard to walk through in the moment, I was really able to reflect and see, ultimately, God was gracious in walking me hand in hand, through that tough season.
I love that. I've had some dark times during the nausea and vomiting part of pregnancy. It can get pretty intense. So, you being a birth nerd and being crunchy as everything like you just said, what kind of birth were you planning?
So we were hoping for a low intervention, unmedicated vaginal hospital birth. So just based off of where we were at, location, insurance, kind of all those factors, a hospital birth was just going to work out best for us in this season. So that was kind of the goal. And because of that, we ended up hiring a doula. We wanted some extra hands, extra support, somebody to really help advocate for us. Our first baby. So, I mean, we have some knowledge, but we don't know everything. And really just wanted another person there to be able to kind of walk us through labor and birth. So, we're just really grateful for that.
Wise choice. Wise
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
So,
So,
take us to the birth then. So, how
yeah.
far along were you? How did it start? When did it start? All the details.
Yeah, so I'll take us back just a little bit before I went into labor. Aubrey was breech for a considerable amount of time. At the 20-week anatomy scan, she was transverse. And, everybody reassured me that we have tons of time, she'll flip, everything will be okay. And so I heard that, but I was really actively trying to get her to flip, right? I needed her in a head down position for like the desires for my birth. So all the spinning babies, all the bouncing on the ball, the pelvic floor work, the breath work, even that silly exercise where you use the ironing board on the couch and have your feet up to try to get them to flip. I was doing all the things. And I then started chiropractic care with a Webster certified chiropractor at 31 weeks. So I had kind of waited. I don't know what my hesitation was, but I started seeing her twice a week to really hopefully help align my pelvis and get this baby to turn. So by 32 weeks, 33 weeks, give or take, she had still not flipped. And at that point, there were a couple little things going on. I did have low maternal weight gain. And so they were a little concerned about possible IGR for the baby and, her size and things like that. So they recommended me having an ultrasound at 34 weeks to get an estimated weight of the baby and to check on positioning. So I was, like I said, I was doing all the things. I mean, if it was out there to try to flip a baby, I was doing it. And it really got to the point where I was in that dark place that you mentioned earlier because I had all these hopes and dreams and desires for my birth. And I felt like the Lord, like had prepared my body and was going to bless me with this. But, it just wasn't working because she wasn't flipping. And so I was really kind of in that dark space and just in this vicious cycle to the point where I had kind of like shut God out of my plans. And I was really focusing on what can I do to flip my baby? What can I do to have the outcome that I want? And it was all about me. It was all about control. It was all about me doing the things. But the Lord really had to break me of that. And I finally was able to just come before Him and say, you know what, Lord? Ultimately, I have to trust you with Aubrey's birth. However, she comes into this world, like you have ordained it, you have predestined it, and I have to have faith in you that you are a good God and that no matter what that looks like, even if it looks different than my plans or hopes, that you're still good. And I think it was a little bit of a test to even say that, I have to trust you with her birth, but I have to trust you with her life.
Right.
And if I can't like even hand over like her birth story to you, like how am I going to, give her back to you? So it was really a stretching of my faith and my dependence on the Lord. He just really had to break down some things in my heart. So that's kind of leading up to her birth. Um, she did eventually turn head down, praise the Lord, because she, like I said, was in that transverse position. So it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been the outcome that I had hoped for. We were definitely heading in towards the route of C-section had she not flipped. So I'm very grateful that she did make that turn. Yeah.
Praise the Lord. That's
I
wonderful.
know. Yes. So as far as leading up to labor, we were doing all the things, walking, the curb walking, red raspberry leaf tea, really everything to get her going. I had actually declined all cervical checks up until the 39th week of pregnancy. And then curiosity really just got the best of me. So I was curious, like, are these exercises that I'm doing helping? And so at 39 weeks and 2 days, I was checked and I was 4 centimeters dilated, 70% effaced, and she was at a -1 station. So I
Wow.
was really encouraged by that.
Yeah.
And it felt like, all my efforts that I had been putting in was like really paying off. So very encouraged. So that was on a Tuesday. And then that following Sunday, which was September 15th, so her birthday, I woke up around 3:50 that morning to use the restroom, like I had done multiple times that night. And I felt like some crampiness, just like generalized crampiness. But it was nothing that I could feel like a start and stop pattern, just like that kind of uncomfortable feeling, really like period like cramps.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, huh, okay, interesting. Went back to bed. Like, I know I'm supposed to go to bed, sleep as much as I can.
Good for you.
Like, so I got back in bed. I tossed and turned for a good 30 minutes or so until my brain finally caught up to the fact that, like, oh, wait, these have a start, a peak, and a stop. And then in a few minutes, it starts again. And so I was like, okay, wait, this is a contraction. So I laid there, 30, 40 minutes or so to the point where I'm like, okay, this is getting like, I need to move. Like, I need to get out of bed because I can't even rest anymore. My husband's laying beside me, just like completely oblivious and asleep. And I was like, I'm just going to let him sleep. We've got hours to do this.
Right.
Um,
First time mom.
right. I mean, I was in it for the long haul. So I get up out of bed and I'm just kind of swaying in our room and kind of leaning over our bed and really starting to breathe through these. Very focused, very internal. And Chris kind of hears me doing that like deep breathing and he rolls over. He's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, I think I'm in labor. I think these are contractions." And it's so funny. Everybody says like, "You'll just know." And I didn't just know. Like, I knew that these were contractions, but like something like my brain couldn't catch up with the fact that like this was labor. I don't know. So he is like, okay, let me get up. I'm going to shower, get everything together, take the dog out to go potty. And so I just continue to work through contractions. And really, the only way I was able to find relief during this time was leaning over any sort of hard surface. So our dresser, the counter in our bathroom, the table in our kitchen, just kind of leaning over, swaying my hips, and really doing some breathing. I had been listening to the Christian hypnobirthing tracks in preparation for birth, and so that breath work of like the four, breathe in for four, breathe out for six, is really what kind of gave me some relief. But things were really getting intense. So the very first contraction that I timed was about 4:30 in the morning, and it was about 30 seconds long, and they were coming about every 2 to 2.5 minutes. I mean, things were really picking up.
Yeah, that's fast for supposed early labor.
Yeah. And so I think that's where, like, we were all a little confused. Even my husband was like, wait, this is way too fast. He's like, this is not what they taught us, right? Like in our childbirth education. So we did end up calling the doula, and she was so sweet and just was like, try to work through your breathing exercises. She's like, if you can get in the shower to get some relief, like, try and do that. I was at the point where I was no longer talking. I was just having to breathe. I wasn't speaking. Like, my husband asked me a question, I would just be like, putting my hand up, like, I can't talk. So he actually kind of jumped in when the doula was speaking and was just like, listen, I think we're a little farther past that point of like getting in the shower. I think we need to go to the hospital. And so I'm really grateful that he stepped in and was that voice that we needed. And really just like the discernment that the Lord gave him, because I was not in the place to make that decision. I was way too far gone. And I think with our doula not being there and me being a first time mom, it was maybe a little bit more difficult for her to gauge exactly where I was at. And so I'm really grateful that he was like, we're going to get in the car and we're going to go to the hospital. So we left and we got to the hospital around 5:30 that morning. And the car ride was pretty terrible, like everybody said.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think just the lack of movement, that was really what was hard for me, because being able to move was what was bringing me some relief.
Yeah.
So we get there, and the one provider, so I knew that the chance of me seeing the provider that I had seen through my whole pregnancy was really slim, because it was like a rotating call situation. So I knew that I would likely have to see someone else, which was okay because I was hoping to get there, really farther into labor. We get checked in, and the lady tells us this certain provider is on call. And I was so discouraged and really got in my head. And that's where things started spiraling for me, because it's the one provider that I was really hoping to not see, just for lots of different reasons. And I was really, really nervous. And this is where a lot of my fears and anxiety and just started to just overwhelm me. I felt like I was completely taken out of my whole, like, labor land. And I was really getting nervous. And that was the first time where I was like, I don't know if I can do this. Just knowing that provider and just things that they, are used to is not what I was hoping for. I was hoping to be able to labor in any position that I could find to bring me comfort, push in any position that I was desiring, immediate skin to skin, like all those great things. And so I was really, really spiraling. Looking back, it was hard to see in the moment, but looking back, the Lord was there. And I know that He is a good God. And, no matter what provider was going to be there, like the Lord was going to be with me through it all. And I wish I had really pressed into that a little bit more in the moment. But like I said, I was kind of spiraling. But we get to triage and I get checked, and I was 7 centimeters and 80% effaced. And I don't think they told me what station, but, pretty far along. At that point, I was shaking, I was throwing up. And so I was definitely, in transition at that point. And I was also very encouraged by that 7 centimeters. So I knew, that today would be her birthday, and they got us upstairs, and things from there went really quick. Um, we think we got upstairs around 6:40 that morning, and then my water broke on its own spontaneously around 7 o'clock, and I was fully dilated about 5 minutes later, and started pushing pretty much as soon as my water broke. That fetal ejection reflex really kind of took over, and it was indescribable. Nothing that I could stop, nothing that I could start. It was completely, my body pushing this baby out. And so that started around 7:05, and Aubrey was born at 7:22 a.m. So altogether, it was a little under 3 hours from start to finish, which is insane to think about.
First time mom, and that's what we call a precipitous labor, an under
Yeah,
3 hour labor, which is not common at
yeah.
all. Wow. So it probably took you by surprise, huh?
Really did. And honestly, there was a little bit of grieving that I went through. Like, after we were, immediate skin to skin, and she was there, and it was so exciting and it was so beautiful. But kind of looking back, there was a little bit of grieving that I had to go through, because I had all these ideas in my head of like what early labor would look like, and the twinkly lights and the essential oils and the music. And I really had this vision for my birth. And although it was a beautiful birth experience, it was nothing like I had planned or prepared. Um, and so I really had to like wrestle with the Lord on that a little bit, because I was honestly like a little bit sad over the things that like I didn't get to experience. And so it's hard when you share like a story like this and it's a precipitous labor and everyone's like, "Girl, like that's so great. Like good for you. You had such a fast labor." And although I'm very grateful for the fast labor, there were things that I still was grieving and had to work through with the Lord, but ultimately it was a really beautiful experience. And so
I completely understand that. I've had one precipitous labor. It was 2 hours from first contraction to when he was born, and an hour of that was spent in the car.
oh my goodness.
But you're right. It's like a two-sided coin, right? Like you don't love the 36 long marathon labor where you're so exhausted and you haven't gotten any sleep and your body is just like done and you're fatigued and you don't want it to go on another second. So that no one loves that. But then on the flip side, your side, what you experienced, you have a labor that's so fast that your mind can't catch up with what your body's doing, that it's taking your breath away because the intensity is that much stronger because it's compacted into this smaller amount of time. The contractions are right on top of each other the entire labor, even though the labor is short. And there's no moment of enjoying the experience because the experience is over almost before you knew it started.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, both experiences are definitely difficult in their own ways, for sure. Absolutely. Having gone through it several times now, I always say my perfect labor length is like somewhere between 4 and 7 hours. Like
Right.
that's like a really sweet spot.
Yeah, for sure.
That time frame. Because I've done the 24-hour or 25-hour one for my first and the 2-hour one for my third. And yeah, the 4 to 7 hours is like, not that we can like order
Right, the
what
sweet
kind of
spot.
labor we want, but I've had one of those and this is a sweet spot for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So like you said, like being in shock, like that was the initial reaction. So like even when like later on my chest, it was just like I said multiple times. I know that they were probably getting tired of me here saying it. I was like, I can't believe that just happened. I can't believe that just happened. Like I said it like repeatedly. And it wasn't that immediate like, my baby, I love you. I mean, I loved her, but it was just like, I can't believe that just happened. And so, that was a little tough because I thought there was going to be this immediate, oh, my baby, she's here, but it wasn't exactly like that. But one God wink that happened during labor and birth that I had not mentioned yet is I knew that one provider was on call, and we asked if there was anybody else who could deliver our baby. And we were told no, like this is the provider. And like I said, I was really discouraged. And in triage, after I had been checked, they're about to take me to LND. This was the God wink. One of the nurses looks at me and she's like, Amanda is on her way to deliver you. And I was like, who is Amanda? Like, I don't know an Amanda. That's not the name of my provider. I didn't know there was an Amanda in the practice. And I just was like, who's Amanda? And the nurse was like, oh, Amanda, the midwife, like as if I was supposed to know who she was. And I was just like, okay, Lord, like, I don't know who Amanda is, but I know she's a midwife and she sounds like she's coming to help deliver our baby. And so just the goodness of God, right? Because I was so fearful of this one provider and what that might look like for the rest of my birth. And for him to be like, you know what? Here's this little gift. Here's this midwife who was absolutely incredible, so gracious, so kind, and gentle, and everything that I needed in that moment when things were so crazy and when things felt so out of control. She was the calming presence that I needed because our doula actually never made it. It was just because things happened so quickly, she just was not able to make it in time. So that midwife was everything I needed in that time, to the point of she was reading my birth preferences at one point and the lights were on, and she said, you guys turn the lights off, she wants dim lighting. And it was just a special moment because I felt so seen and heard and by her. Even though at that point I was so far into labor land that I didn't care if the lights were on or off. It just was a moment where I was like, okay, like she is here for me. Like she is here to try to honor my wishes to the best of her ability. Um, and so I'm so grateful for that sweet midwife that was there. I don't know how that worked out other than the Lord just allowing her to be present for my birth. So I'm very, very grateful for that. And because of that, I had asked for, just some support with everything, so that she was really kind of stretching my perineum and, massaging everything with oil. So I actually ended up not tearing at all due to all of the help and support that she was able to provide. So again, just so grateful for her. And yeah, it was a really sweet, sweet thing from the Lord. So.
That is sweet. So then you were able to, not that you were laboring that long, but labor and push in the positions that you wanted to then?
Yeah, exactly. So I was really kind of leaning over the bed. That is really from the start to finish is where I found the most support and comfort. I was leaning over the hospital bed. My water broke. That, fetal ejection reflex took over, and I did a couple pushes standing up, but it was just really difficult. So Amanda had encouraged me to try to get in the bed in any position that kind of felt comfortable. I tried hands and knees for a few pushes. That wasn't really getting her in a great, spot. So I did end up side lying, and that's ultimately how she was born. So
Cool. Well, I know
yeah.
Amanda pretty well. And so it's funny, as soon as you said Amanda, I was like, oh, I know exactly who she's talking about. Um, that's
Yes, she
awesome. She
was
basically lives
incredible.
there. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Yeah, so after sweet Aubrey was born, they laid her right on my belly. She had a little bit of a shorter cord, so she wasn't able to come completely up to my chest. But it was great just to be able to have her in my arms finally. And we waited till the cord stopped pulsating. My husband actually cut the cord. And little kind of thing that happened right after that, I could tell the mood changed very quickly. And I mean, so kind, but really kind of like got in my face and was just like, listen, the cord has detached from your placenta, and I'm going to have to manually extract your placenta. And this is going to be painful, but this has to be done.
Oof.
And I, at that point, was just like, okay, like I trusted her. She just helped me through this, incredible experience, this beautiful birth, everything I had hoped for. And obviously, this is not something I was expecting, but in that moment, I really trusted her and I knew that it was serious, just by the way, like her tone of voice. And like I said, the whole mood of the room changed, like the chatter of the nurses, like everything just kind of changed and it got really serious. And I knew with a little bit of education I had had she not been able to remove it herself, that we were likely going to the OR. And that was something I was, fearful of. And so that was a really painful experience. I told my husband, like, right after, I was like, I would birth five more babies before I would have a placenta removed manually, because it was so painful and so intense. And I mean, she was arm deep inside of me trying to get that, but I knew it was important. I knew she had to do that. Um, so it was one of those really tough moments, but we got through it. Lots of breathing, lots of hand holding with nurses and my husband. And I had Aubrey on my chest, but I did end up giving her to Chris at one point just because it was really intense. So yeah.
Okay. And I'm like, as a doula, sitting here with so many questions. Okay. So before your husband cut the cord, everything was fine. How
Yeah.
how long was it after Aubrey was born, if you can remember, before he cut the cord? I know that's probably
Honestly,
fuzzy.
yeah, time was a blur. It felt like a couple minutes where we were just like sitting there. Things were really like kind of getting calm. Like I finally was like, I had that moment of like relief. And So I would say a few minutes, maybe 2 to 3 minutes or so
After
after
she
she
was
had
born?
after she was born that we all just kind of stood there. I was not standing, but they all just kind of stood, let us take it in for a second, wait for the cord. And then Chris cut it. And then that's when she kind of, you could tell, like right after that, things kind of shifted.
So he cut it, and so she was detached. So I'm like picturing this because you say like the cord detached from the placenta, and I'm thinking like my mind is just like, where on the placenta? Like how close up to the placenta was the
Yeah.
cord? Like, did they let you see it afterwards? Like where it came
I
off?
did take a picture. Like I said, things were so fuzzy at that point that I was just like, all I could do was I was like, Chris, take a picture of the placenta. Because we had not planned to keep the placenta. So I was like, take a picture before they take it. But I believe what happened, I think what she did is she went to start tugging on the placenta a little bit to try to get it to come out, versus allowing it to like expel, on its own. And I think what happened is, if I understood it correctly, that after the cord had been cut, maybe she gave it a little tug to get the placenta come out. And that's when the cord, I believe,
It
detached from the
like popped
placenta.
off. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what happened. So that's when she had to like just manually go to get it. So
Mm. So the placenta probably, because the cord popped off, the placenta probably hadn't detached yet at that
yes, and
point.
that is something like in my birth preferences. I had asked to like, I wanted that to just like I wanted to have time for my placenta to be delivered, like whenever within reason,
Yeah.
obviously. And so I think maybe it was a little premature. But it's one of those things. I don't know for certain, and there may have been a reason why she felt like she needed to get it out. I had also asked to not have any pitocin, post birth, only if it was absolutely necessary. So I don't know if maybe she was trying to avoid that by getting the placenta out sooner. Not 100% sure, but yeah,
Mm.
that's the only part that I was kind of like slightly annoyed because I was like, if
Yeah.
we had maybe just given it a few more minutes, maybe it would have saved me from all of that.
All
But
of
who
that
knows? Yeah.
intense pain. Mm.
Yeah.
Man.
Who
Yeah.
knows?
You're making me want to research all of that more. Now I'm like, okay, I need to dive into that because I just want like this better understanding of everything that happened and how, but that's the birth nerd in me. Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on. I'm sorry about
No.
that.
Yeah.
Deeply
Thanks.
sorry. Oh. Okay. So, postpartum. Take us to postpartum. How did that go?
Yeah.
How did breastfeeding go? All of that. I mean, she's 6 months old. So, to me, I kind of feel like you're still in postpartum, but you're not like in early postpartum anymore. So,
Right.
tell us about it.
Yeah. Yeah, so the immediate postpartum was actually really beautiful. It was an amazing experience. I think those first 2 weeks after she was born, I was just living off of the birth high. I mean, everything was magical. The sky was more blue, the grass was more green, like things were just incredible. I really feel like the birth that I had really just was everything that I needed for postpartum for those first couple of weeks. So after those first magical 2 weeks, I finally had like that one day of like baby blues where everything was awful, right? It was just a really, really hard day. And then after that, things kind of trended upward, which is great. As far as nursing goes, I had seen a lactation consultant during pregnancy because I knew that I was hoping to breastfeed and I really didn't know anything about breastfeeding. So my goal was to try to get a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of education on the front end to hopefully help once she arrived. So we saw our lactation consultant, I think it was day 2 or 3 of Aubrey's life, because latching was really, really painful. Toe curling, painful. I was getting anxious anytime that I knew that I would have to latch her because it was just so much pain. And it just is one of those things. I was really determined to breastfeed, but it was starting to become a big issue. So we saw a lactation consultant, worked with her for a few visits. She helped with positioning and just different things. And it helped some, but the pain was still there. The pain was it was more painful on one side than another. And so things just weren't working out great. I also was blessed to have an oversupply and a really heavy letdown, which is great in a sense. But when you have this little baby that you're just bombarding with a lot of milk on the front end, she was, not wanting to latch because she knew what was coming. And it was just a lot of issues with breastfeeding in the beginning. So we ended up taking her to a pediatric dentist to have her evaluated for like a tongue and lip ties. And I was pretty certain that she had a lip tie, tongue tie. I wasn't 100%, sold if that was it. But the pediatric dentist looked and, took images and really talked us through, what we were seeing. And Aubrey had a pretty significant lip and tongue tie, which was making, the function of nursing very painful and all of it. So we actually had it revised at about 5 weeks old. I went 5 weeks with a lot of pain during each nursing session. And then we had that done, and it was instantaneous, like best decision ever made. That first latch after her procedure, it was night and day. It was so much more comfortable. You could tell she was comfortable and not having to strain so much. So I'm really grateful that we ended up having that done because it was everything that I needed to continue on the nursing journey because I really had goals to breastfeed her for as long as we could. But we really needed that lip and tongue tie. So I'm really grateful for that.
That's great that you got that done. It really does. For some people, it can make, like you said, night and day, a world of a difference.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah. So, other than nursing and getting that tongue and lip tie revised, we had just a couple other things that came up that no one had really talked about that I hadn't really heard of previously. Because she was breached for so long, our pediatrician was a little bit concerned about hip dysplasia, I believe. And so we ended up having to do two hip ultrasounds for Aubrey early on just to make sure that everything was developing correctly. And we're thankful that, things are looking good. But that's something I really did not know was a potential risk of having a breech baby, is potentially having hip issues. So just one of those things. We also, she had pretty severe acid reflux and a dairy intolerance. So I have been dairy free for a few months now to help with her symptoms of acid reflux. And that has been helpful. But we did have to put her on some acid reflux medicine just to help with like the projectile vomiting. And since then, that has been a lot better. So lots of little things postpartum that made it really tough. I think postpartum is one of those things that no one can really prepare you for until you walk through it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I was prepared. I did the freezer meals and I made sure, I had support. My mom stayed with us for the first week, which we're very grateful for. I had awesome friends just check in and bring meals. And just like texted encouraging words and things. So I was grateful for the community that we had. But I don't think I was prepared for how tough postpartum was. You hear about pregnancy being tough and sometimes labor's hard, but like postpartum for me, again, was like the whole theme of the Lord having to break me and strip me of my selfishness, of just different things that like sin struggles that I have, that it was like, you know, you can't be selfish when you have a baby. So the Lord really walked me through postpartum. I shared this with a friend recently that just like the sheer dependence that I had to have on the Lord during postpartum is something that I've never experienced and really has grown my faith exponentially, even in this last, 5 or 6 months. He has been good and he's been very gracious in that tough season. So,
I feel like quite by design, when we have these pregnancies, we're having to speak to the Lord in ways that we never have before. And we have this life growing in us that we're so concerned about. And like you were mentioning with your anxiousness and stuff, and speaking to Him and being in relationship with Him, creating this deeper relationship and dependence that then transfers into labor, where for me personally, my labor is a little longer than yours. At least most of them were. um, that had to transfer to labor and rely on Jesus more in labor than you know what I mean? Just like the tangible
Yeah.
presence there more than any other time in my life, which then transfers into postpartum. And it's just like this building and this layering and this deepening that's happening. And then that postpartum dependence is what he's like building this foundation for you as a mother,
Yeah.
for you to be relying on him to guide you as a mother, because you're going to need, that dependence or that guidance from him and from the Holy Spirit for the rest of your life, but especially
Right.
for your parenting journey, which is a long one.
Yeah, for sure.
Any last thoughts? Any advice? Anything else you want to say that God taught you that you haven't mentioned yet? Anything else at all?
Yeah, I would just say really take some time to educate yourself. See what's out there, see what your options are. Go in having, ideas and preferences and desires. But ultimately, like one thing that I learned and would encourage anyone is just have those things, but just very loosely in the palm of your hands and just allow the Lord to just work in and through your pregnancy, your labor, your postpartum, because you can plan and you can do and you can try to be in control of all these things, but ultimately we're in control of nothing. The Lord is in control, and so if we're able to just kind of open our hands and hold things loosely and really surrender all of these things to Him, I think you'll just see so much more life and joy from it than if you hold things, close-handed. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. This has been such a delight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. You can reach me at Surrendered Birth Services on Instagram or email me at contact@surrenderedbirthservices.com. Be sure not to miss an episode by hitting the follow button. Also, we'd love for you to leave a written review of the show so that more people's births and lives can be changed by the love of Jesus and the empowerment of accurate birth education. If you really enjoyed this episode in particular, please take a screenshot of it and post it to your Instagram story, tagging Surrendered Birth Services. If you would like to be a guest on the Surrendered Birth Stories podcast, please click the link in the episode show notes to fill out your interest form. Also, if you're interested in taking my childbirth classes, birth consultations, or having me as your birth doula, please click on the link in the show notes to take you to my website for online and in-person options. Just as a reminder, this show is not giving medical advice, so please continue to see your personal care provider as needs arise. We hope you have a great week. And remember, learn all that you can, make the best plans, and then leave it in God's hands. This is going to sound kind of funny. I just had a wild shower experience.
Wow.
Yes, so I make my own shampoo, and it has like liquid Castile soap and water and some essential oils and apple cider vinegar. But because it's like homemade, it has like a natural separation. Sometimes you have to like shake it up. So I was getting ready to shampoo and I went to shake it up, and there must have been like some in the top, and it's a lot thinner than normal shampoo. And it squirted like a full thing into both of my eyes.
No.
And when I tell you, I have never felt a burn like vinegar in my eyeballs
Yeah. Oh
before.
my goodness.
So I spent like 15 to 20 minutes just in the water, just like rubbing my eyes and my face, just trying to get the burn to go away. So my face is like super red right now. And
Oh
I'm
my
just like,
gosh.
my eyes are still burning.
Oh, I'm sorry that happened. That's terrible.
Yeah, me too. What? I know. I texted my husband. I was like, I just had the most horrible shower experience of my life. Oh,